It was supposed to be a routine dig. In August 2023, a team of archaeologists from the University of Toulouse began excavation on a newly identified Roman bath complex near the ancient settlement of Glanum. The soil was dry. The strata were clean. No signs of ritual use, no signs of disturbance. But at exactly 3:07 a.m., on the fifth night, a vibration hummed through the earth. The sensors registered at first, a pulse with no seismic origin. Then came the sound. As if a cathedral buried deep beneath the hillside had awakened for a single breath. The dig halted. No metallic objects were found. No iron, no bronze, no ancient belfry stones. Nothing that could have produced such a perfect tone. Soil was dry, the air not quite still. Then came the second shock. One of the students, Anne Leclerc, found an old Vatican archive file online, uploaded anonymously, marked only Companam non vidi, SED, ADV, -1939. I did not see the bell, but I heard it. They played the tape. The Vatican log was dated March 1939. No known link to Glanum. The coordinates marked on the cover. 0. The prime meridian. But the recording was real, and somehow it had captured the same tone that echoed in France nearly 90 years later, beneath a site with no bell. The audio technician on the dig described the sound as pure, not like metal, but like memory. It didn't ring in the air. It rang in my chest. The French Ministry of Culture got involved, then the Vatican, then something else. A week after the sound, 6 men arrived in suits with no insignia, no names. They claimed to be from a pan-European preservation initiative. One held a single file, Codex, BCR 0007, stamped in red. Project Vespers. They told the dig team to leave. The hillside was sealed. The excavation ended. But not before Anea did one last thing. She took a small soil sample. And beneath the microscope, she found tiny flecks of polished brass, shaped like no known alloy pattern. Almost as if the metal had been unformed. Molecular analysis showed a paradox. The brass hadn't aged because it hadn't been made yet. Weeks later, Anea began receiving emails from a dead address. From herself, one message, dated 31DEC 2025. 2 years in the future. The subject line read, "Do not let them build the bell." Attached was a blueprint. It's not of a tower, not of a chime, but of a mechanism, concentric, coiled, with impossible symmetry. At the bottom, a handwritten note. It rings to remind the world of what's missing. She hadn't opened the file since, because in her dreams, she already hears it ringing. And when she wakes, something about the world feels lighter, too light, as if something had been pulled out from underneath reality, replaced with an echo. Before Anea, others had heard the bell. The first recorded account dates back to 1133. A Cistercian monk at Melrose Abbey in Scotland wrote in his prayer journal, before morning prayers, "I heard a long chime. No one had touched a bell. There were no bells on the tower, yet we all stopped at once as if someone had called our names without sound. The abbey had no bell. It had been melted down years before, during a raid, yet 17 monks swore to hearing the same sounds, seconds, solemn, resonant. The next morning, Brother Eamon was gone. No one remembered him. No name in the rolls, no belongings, no gravestone. Only the journal remained. Across the next 9 centuries, the pattern would repeat, always the same. A place of silence and separation. Monasteries, prisons, sealed fortresses. A bell tolling from nowhere. One person disappearing, and no one remembering they had ever existed. 1587 to Kyoto, Japan. The private notes of Zen master and Shu. Before I reached enlightenment, a presence came to the gate. No knock, but I heard a bell. From within my mind, a disciple named Haruki vanished the next morning. No one recalled teaching him, but a walking staff, carved with his name, still hung in the corridor. 1712. Lalibela, Ethiopia Porchis. Surveyors mapping underground churches reported a bell tone during subterranean scans. Afterward, one engineer, Esteban Velo, was reassigned. No record of his employment existed, but his ink signature remained in the registry. The ink faded 3 days later. 1939. Vatican archiveth veri tapen a discovered. No one recalled who recorded it. No technician signed the log. The drawer it was stored in wasn't listed in any filing system. Shape of the anomaly was becoming clear. A 7-second bell tone, no physical bell, one person erased from memory, tangible items remaining. Everyone else convinced the person never existed. It wasn't a haunting. It wasn't death. It was erasure by consensus. As if reality ran a correction script hand, someone was declared redundant. In 2001, at a former hospice in Belgium, an 86-year-old woman named Claire DeVos was recorded sleep-talking. "I am the bell. No one notices when they've rung me." She died the next day. No staff remembered her. Her name wasn't in the census, yet a charcoal portrait of her still hung on the West Wing. In 2024, a Berlin-based memory research team published a suppressed paper. The Bell phenomenon is a mnemonic integrity event, a protocol within reality that deletes what cannot be maintained in the collective recall. The bell is not a warning, it is a notification. So the question became, who built the bell? Who decides what is removed? And if you're next, will you remember yourself? The file arrived on Anais' hard drive at 4:44 a.m., exactly 2 weeks after the dig was shut down. It had no sender, no subject, just a file named BCR_form0.dwg. Inside was a blueprint. At first glance, it resembled a bell, cross-section silhouette of conic curves and resonance chambers, but it was wrong. The dimensions bent inward. The spatial ratios were irrational, impossible to construct in three-dimensional space. The symmetry broke itself halfway through the structure. It had no top, no bottom, only inward. And yet, it looked like it had always existed. At the bottom corner was a signature, a dawn vellum, age 10, year 2031. The name did not exist in any global census. The year was still 7 years in the future. The signature had been written in pencil, and the graphite matched no known carbon isotope on record. When Anais showed the blueprint to her former professor, he stared at it in silence for nearly 6 minutes before speaking. "This, isn't a design, it's a decision." He died in his sleep 2 days later. His name, once etched into a university faculty page, was gone. His office was repurposed before the end of the week. Nane began to feel it too. Subtle things. Emails from people who didn't exist, keys that no longer opened anything, childhood photograph of herself, holding a hand that no one else could identify. The blueprint had started to shift, on its own. Every night she checked the file, the angles had altered. The inner curves deepened. New symbols appeared along the rim. Glyphs, not of any known language, but disturbingly reminiscent of cochlear nerve patterns in the human brain, as if the bell wasn't meant to ring in air, but in memory itself. One morning, her laptop screen lit up before she touched it. A message in plain white font appeared over a black background. "You are a custodian of Echo. Do not let it finalize." Then nothing. She printed the blueprint. She burned it. She deleted the file. The next day it was back, on a different device, signed by the same boy, a dawn vellum. She called a journalist, one she trusted, one who had chased lost languages in Siberian monasteries and written about cognitive Cold War experiments. He asked one question: "Have you heard it ring again?" She hadn't, but she knew she would, because the bell doesn't wait to be built. It waits to be remembered. And once you hear it, you become part of its architecture. The first time Anna heard the voice, she wasn't awake. It wasn't speech. It was something older. A question pressed into her chest without sound or breath. "Have you left the door open long enough?" She opened her eyes, bleeding lightly from the nose. Her heartbeat wasn't panicked. It was synchronized, pulsing in rhythm with a silence she couldn't explain. She stood up and blinked. There were shapes in the air, not objects. Outlines, as if the world had a scaffolding and she was just now seeing it. That day she returned to Avignon, to a place from her childhood, the old conservatory. The bell tower had collapsed decades ago. Nothing remained except the sound. 3 tones, deep, gentle, internal. No one else reacted. But she felt it, in her spine. At the edge of the grass where the bell once stood, a plaque read, "To those who still hear it. Welcome back. The next morning, her phone buzzed. No caller ID. One audio file. After it stopped, her ears rang. Not with echo, but with absence. Something had been deleted. She couldn't remember what. She searched. Not for answers, for patterns. In hidden forums, blurred screenshots, and archived threads, she found phrases like, "I heard the sound before my own thoughts." It rang inside my father. He stopped talking after that. "If you hear it, don't speak. You might replace something." And one line kept appearing, unsigned, across hundreds of disconnected sources. We remember in order to exist. The bell remembers to ensure we do not. She received a file from an old contact, a retired psychoacoustic engineer in Prague. It was labeled VOCE_0.WAV. She listened in a sealed room. Alone, at 12 seconds, her mouth moved involuntarily. She spoke 39 seconds in a tongue with no vowels. A deep harmony, as if layered versions of her were speaking through one throat. Then she blacked out. When she woke, she had forgotten the layout of her childhood home. She couldn't draw her mother's face. She wasn't fading. She was being revised. She called the journalist again. They met in Vienna. He looked older, his voice thinner. She asked him, "Do you remember me?" I answered. Not with language, but yes. Together, they traveled. To an abandoned Soviet facility where whispers arrived before mouths moved. To a church in Dakar where shadows fell in unnatural patterns. To a town in Norway where everyone had the same dream every seventh night. Each place held something unspoken, not haunting, not prophecy. A system. A bell is not sound. It is the memory of alignment. Then, in Spain, behind the altar of a crumbling monastery in Tarragona, they found a list. Plastic laminated, typed in modern font, preserved a list of names. Each name followed by a date, a designation. Some names were crossed out. An ace's name was there. So was the journalist's. Only one name had no date. A Don Vellum status. Between, age, unknown, location. Residual NA changed. She forgot simple things. Words, places, the shape of her hands in childhood. Her voice in song. She began to fade from photos. Reflections showed her older, or younger, or gone. The blueprint she once received had changed again. Now it wasn't a bell. It was a network. A resonance system. Not designed to ring, but to overwrite. She dreamt of a space that wasn't a room. It was a breath before speech. A space of potential memory, where she wasn't herself anymore. She stood before a door. Behind it, she could hear her own voice, distorted, saying things she hadn't said yet. And behind that, the bell. Not a thing, but an intention. A decision repeating itself through form. When she woke, she was outside. No one recognized her. A child looked up and said, "You're the girl from my dream." She asked, "What dream?" He said, "You were ringing inside my ears." She went silent for 7 days. And on the 8th, the world blinked. People nearby forgot the day. Calendars showed blank space. Digital devices reset their clocks to 0 hours, 0 minutes, and 7 seconds. The journalist vanished. Only his recorder remained. It played one phrase, over and over. To ring is to remember nothing but the act of ringing. She no longer searched for the bell. She was part of its perimeter, and the perimeter was closing. Anae no longer saw the world as it was. She saw it in layers, like sound waves coiled around a hollow center. Roads curved where they hadn't. Names erased themselves from street signs. The air itself shimmered with memory, trying to remember itself. Through it all, the bell waited. Not in a tower, not underground, but in every unspoken thought, every silence that came too soon. The final message arrived as a letter, typed, postmarked from where you forgot you began. The architecture is ready. You are the residence. No name, no return address. But the moment she touched the paper, she remembered. A Don Vellum. He had never been a boy. He had never been born. He was the architect of the memory circuit. a self-recursive entity written into existence by the act of remembering him. She returned to where it began, the dig site, abandoned, sealed by the government. But beneath the earth, it still pulsed. Stone that hummed, air that remembered. She stood in the empty chamber, and there, buried in dust, was the device. The bell. But it wasn't a structure. It was a mirror, circular, silent, warm. She looked in. Her face shifted. Her past selves flickered across the surface. Child, student, stranger, then nothing.
Ow.
Her reflection was gone. Only a question appeared. Are you ready to be forgotten so others can remember? She answered nothing, because the bell doesn't need permission. It only needs silence. She placed her hand on the mirror, and the world blinked. Elsewhere. A boy in Morocco woke up, knowing a language no one taught him. A clock in Iceland rang once, then melted. A recording studio in Montreal captured a 7-second tone that erased the hard drive. No one knew what it meant. But across the world, 7 people whispered the same phrase at the same time. We ring to forget, we ring to return. Somewhere beyond chronology, Anne stood, a chamber of memory, and a dawn vellum appeared. Not as a person, but as a pattern, a structure made of almost recognition. You remembered long enough, he said. Now it is our turn to hold what comes next. Anace's name disappeared from files, her photos glitched. Friends paused, confused at dinner tables. Didn't someone used to? Her presence became a shadow of something unformed. But one thing remained. The bell tone. Subtle. In train whistles. In elevator chimes. In old VHS static. 7 seconds of slow, deliberate truth. It's a memory that no one could name, but everyone still felt. Because the bell doesn't destroy memory. It replaces the unreliable. And you've heard it now. You've felt its weight in your chest. So if tomorrow someone forgets your name, remember this: the toll has begun, and the bell is already ringing through you.